This account was conducted and documented by Joe Lewis and Letitia Bashford. What you are getting ready to hear is an account of a family who has fallen prey to the school to prison pipeline. This is their story.
I was pretty trusting of the school system when my sons first entered. I was a young, single mom and not very confident as a mother. I thought it would be good for my kids to be in school and be guided by people better educated and more mature than myself. I had been a college dropout and was on welfare when my kids entered school. I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life and thought that teachers and principals were a more enlightened class.
I had some behavioral problems in school. I had one teacher who would send me to the principal's office and just leave me there for hours. I would miss a majority of my education. I wasn't perfect, but this teacher gave me no breaks. The only time I didn't get kicked out was when she read a book called Where the Red Fern Grows. It was something that I liked and enjoyed. No one ever asked me what I liked or what kept me interested.
Letitia first met Bridget as a student in her Education and Cultural Diversity course. Bridget has since completed her teaching license and is now teaching overseas. Letitia asked Bridget to write about her son's experiences in greater detail. As a single mom struggling to make ends meet, Bridget depended on the public schools in a large Midwestern city to help her sons find a path towards success. Frankly, they failed her. The purpose of this article was to critique the institutional racism and classism that undergird it, giving light to the issue that continues to plague our schools today. Joe Lewis and Letitia Bashford sought to interrupt the authoritative discourse of zero tolerance in schools, a system of discipline that pushes many marginalized students, especially young black men, into the school-to-prison pipeline. A recent infographic founded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation stated that African American youths are nearly as 5 times as likely to be confined as their white counterparts.
More enlightened class. Both my boys had been in school for a few years. I was already getting the sense that black boys were being treated more harshly than other kids. I saw it in the way teachers talked to the boys. I saw it in the way the boys came home angry. There was complaining about what appeared to be white privilege. It seemed the white students got along better with teachers in almost every class. Teachers and school administrators think they have to keep a closer eye on black boys and crack down on them sooner to prevent them from becoming bigger problems. Unfortunately, this tendency to regulate black boys more frequently and harshly only contributes to the problems these boys already face. One day,
To witness mostly black kids in special education classes made me think that something was wrong because some of them were very smart. My friend David, he was one of the smartest kids I knew. However, he was in special education all day because he was hyperactive. I always thought maybe they should give him more stuff to do instead of having him in a class below his level. Classes for special education students would always be filled with a majority of blacks. Higher income students or students who were good at sports always seemed to get a pass on things.
The family were clearly aware of the authoritative discourses at work in schools, such as white privilege tracking and the categorizing of certain kids as trouble. One important way in which these authoritative discourses function is through the use of disproportionate and exclusionary discipline practice, as stated in this correspondence. Joe and Letitia stated in their correspondence that instead of using discipline as a way to get rid of troubled kids, we need systems that purposefully steer them toward responsible decision-making and productive learning. This important change must begin with a thoughtful critique of zero-tolerance policies in our schools.
and cakes and singing songs. Some of the kids joked about giving birthday spankings. Apparently, this kind of talk concerned Mrs. Howard, so she gave an earnest lecture to the students about how there would be no hitting or spanking each other in the classroom. She reminded them that the school had zero tolerance for hitting, and if you hit someone, you could be suspended or expelled. Now to Jordan, I guess her words seemed hypocritical, because the girls in the classroom repetitively hit, pinched, and poked him without consequences. So in response to her lecture, he proceeded to get out of his seat, walk up to Mrs. Howard, and slug her in the arm. Of course, since she had just given the entire class a lecture on zero tolerance for hitting, she had to follow through. She sent Jordan to the principal's office. The principal kept Jordan in her office for the rest of the day and then sent him home on the bus with a paper saying he had been suspended. After the suspension period was up, I went to the principal's office with Jordan and his father. It wasn't quite often that his dad showed up for things, but for this, I implored him. I thought it would be good for the principal to meet Jordan's father and see that Jordan had a father. The principal told us almost as soon as we walked in the door that Jordan was being transferred to another school. I asked why, and she said that her school had a zero-tolerance policy for violence. I told her that she could not put in a transfer request without talking to the parents first. District administrators in the main office had told me this. She completely ignored us and said the transfer was complete. The
zero-tolerance policies were developed in the 1990s by federal government as a means to prevent drug use and gun violence in our schools. The initial purpose was to reduce and or prevent significant and intolerable infractions like selling illicit drugs or carrying dangerous weapons. Today, zero-tolerance policies are so overused that students often receive severe punishments. Two examples of the zero tolerance being wrongfully executed is one where a 15-year-old boy was suspended and transferred for having a butter knife in his school's bag. He forgotten about it until it was scanned by security officers. The student was handcuffed to a chair until the police arrived to arrest him. Another young man was arrested, suspended, and transferred for carrying a small pair of scissors that he'd been using the night before to wrap Christmas gifts.
The zero-tolerance policy was very confusing to me from the beginning. It wasn't until I started seeing its effects that I really started questioning such a strict policy. There should be a lengthy discussion and serious thought put into how a child is punished. Each situation should be examined with an open, rational mind. In this case, I felt no respect from the principal whatsoever. When Jordan was
Zero-tolerance policies have increased the use of policing tactics on school campuses, as well as the physical presence of police and armed security guards. A visible police presence on a school campus can amplify emotional tension for boys and young men of color, even those who do not have a criminal record. Constant surveillance may make them feel as though they are always under suspicion of criminal behavior, an atmosphere that makes productive learning more difficult and may encourage oppositional attitudes. In such an environment, is it any wonder that marginalized students feel alienated and rejected?
The police presence was very strong in my high school. They even had their own office, and officers would take you in there and put on black gloves and threaten you. They would arrange drug busts. I was taken to their office one time for an altercation, and the police threatened me. They shouted stuff like, "Don't you know who Mr. Blank is? Do you know who we are?" When I was in first grade, my teacher would always want kids to stay in at recess. He would choose one or two kids to stay behind and read with him. One day, he told me and my friend Tim to stay behind and read with him. When everyone was gone, Tim was sitting on his lap, and he was advising me to sit on his lap also. He was rubbing Tim's inner thigh. When I told him no, he told me to listen to him, and I told him I would read from my seat. He became very angry. He tried to grab me, so I hit him and ran to the principal's office to tell the principal what he was doing. The teacher came in behind me and told the principal what I did and that I was lying. I was the one who got in trouble and suspended. I was 6 years old. A few years later, at the grocery store with my mom, I saw this teacher in the paper for molestation at another school.
When Jordan was in 8th grade, he and another boy beat up a white boy that called them racist names. There was a write-up on Jordan, and there was a big meeting with me and the principal and the social worker. They were determined to prove that Jordan's story was a lie and that the beating was unprovoked. Jordan was guilty hands down, and there was no opportunity for him to learn about his mistake or make amends. I was told that my sons were high-risk students. I was confused, angry, and losing trust fast.
One day, I was late going to middle school. I was walking slow because I was very sick. I had been throwing up all morning, and I could not reach my mother at work. I was compelled to go to school because I did not want to get my mother in any more trouble. When I was 3 blocks from school, a police officer stopped me and asked me why I wasn't in school. I explained to him that I was very sick and that's why I was late. He told me to get in the back of his car. Then he gave me a black trash bag. I thought at first that he was going to drive me to school, but he took me downtown to the juvenile center. On the way downtown, I started to vomit profusely. It poured out of my mouth and into the trash bag and onto the back seats. The officer was more concerned about his seats.
In high school, Jordan got in a shouting match with the vice principal. He had a reputation for knocking kids around in his office. He brought Jordan into his office one day because Jordan was being too loud in the hallway. Jordan got mouthy, so the cop was called in. Before the cop got there, the vice principal hit Jordan, and Jordan hit him back. The cop only saw that Jordan had hit the vice principal. This situation was a nightmare for me. It seemed like the school was more interested in protecting the vice principal than anything else. I reported the whole thing to the district administration and demanded an investigation. The investigator's conclusions were more supportive of Jordan than the vice principal. She found reason to believe that Jordan had been abused by the vice principal. She recommended that 3 of the staff people be suspended. Before her report came through, which took months, Jordan had been sent to another school. One day, I got a call from the police that Jordan, Philip, and some of his friends were locked up because they were caught wandering the streets. They were all charged with truancy. Did you know it's a crime now? The cop who arrested them was very rude to me while I was getting the boys. He told me that Jordan was someday going to end up in jail because of his mouth. I thought saying that in front of my child was terribly rude and insensitive.
Reflecting on Jordan's overall experience in school, we see a child who has witnessed and experienced abuse in school from a very early age. We see a discipline system that pushes him away rather than seeking to rehabilitate or reestablish meaningful connection. We see failed opportunities to hold him accountable for his actions by expecting him to make amends for his mistakes in the settings where they occurred. We see parents who feel judged and powerless in the face of non-negotiable school policies.
My 6th grade year, my teacher was one of the best teachers I ever had. I cannot remember ever going to the principal's office or getting suspended that year. He took the time to help every individual student in the class with what they needed. He would ask me to come talk to him when he thought a problem was arising. He tended to the needs of every student so that we all could learn and stay interested. His class was so energetic, and all the students benefited from that.
So, at the end of the day, what can be done? What's the call to action? Joe and Letitia has some advice as far as what can be done in schools, such as recruiting and retaining highly effective teachers that don't look at students as criminals disrupting class, but as humans. Increase funding for varied extracurricular opportunities in the school, and implementing restorative justice measures in the curriculum as well as disciplinary system of the school as an alternative to some of the zero tolerance policies.